Okay, this article is interesting because it addresses an issue that I really like. I have talked about this before in the sense that just because you may be a vegetarian, you are not necessarily having a lesser impact than somebody who eats meat, because you could be a vegetarian but driving so much, flying so much, and so on, or a person who is eating and riding a bicycle all the time may be reducing his footprint, her footprint in many ways as well. So there is no silver bullet, and one criteria never closes the loop on what we are doing, even for a simple thing like whether we should use plastic bags, paper bags, cloth bags for shopping, let's say. It depends on what criteria you look at, and there is nice literature on that as well. So this is about a multi-criteria analysis of meat and milk alternatives from nutritional, health, environmental, and cost perspectives. Those are the things you want to worry about when you want to tell people to eat plant-based meat or go away from dairy to something else. And this is a PNAS article, the Proceedings of the National Academies of Sciences of the US. I should have put the DOI, which I forgot to do, so let me do that in near real time. To find a place to put it is always tricky, but here I go. Where will I put it? Let's just put it right there. So you will have to stop the video and stare at it to find it, but nonetheless, there it is. Okay, let's read the abstract, and these papers also provide significance, kind of explaining why this papers and its results are important. So, reducing meat and dairy intake has been identified as a necessary strategy for mitigating the high environmental impacts food systems are currently having on climate change, biodiversity loss associated with land use changes for food production, and of course freshwater use. There is also energy use, by the way. Having a choice of dedicated meat and milk replacements available to consumers can help in the transition toward more plant-based diets, but concerns about nutritional and health impacts and high costs can impede uptake. For example, organic food may be friendlier to the environment, but if it's very costly, then only rich people can buy it, right? Here we conduct a multi-criteria assessment of 24 meat and milk alternatives that integrates nutritional, health, environmental, and cost analysis with a focus on high-income countries. So that's already a problem, but also the methodologies of looking at nutritional values, comparing them, health impacts, environmental impacts, and costs can be tricky, especially if it's in high-income countries alone. Unprocessed plant-based foods such as peas, soybeans, and beans performed best in our assessment across all domains. In comparison, processed plant-based meats such as veggie burgers, traditional meat replacements such as tempeh, and plant milks were associated with less climate benefits and greater costs than unprocessed foods, but still offered substantial environmental, health, and nutritional benefits compared to animal products. Our findings suggest that a range of food products exist that, when replacing meat and dairy in current diets, would have multiple benefits, including reductions in nutritional imbalances, dietary risks and mortality, environmental resource use and pollution, and when choosing unprocessed foods over processed ones, also diet costs. The findings provide support for public policies and business initiatives aimed at increasing their uptake. But as again, you have to carry a portfolio, so that just because you move to meat and milk alternatives doesn't mean you get permission to drive more, which is what happens in general. People say, I'm doing something, so then they forget that they are doing other things that are bad for the environment as well. So what's the significance? Many meat and milk alternatives have been assessed from nutritional, environmental, and cost perspectives, but the analyses are rarely consistently combined, which limits the ability to identify co-benefits and trade-offs across domains. Our study advances each analysis and provides a comprehensive multi-criteria assessment of meat and milk alternatives from nutritional, health, environmental, and cost perspectives. For a full contextualization, we compared the meat and milk alternatives to the animal products they intend to replace, as well as to the unprocessed plant-based foods that are made from we considered comparisons along multiple and complementary units of measurements, including per serving and per calorie, and we included comparisons per product as well as per overall diets in dedicated replacement analysis. So if a person is only replacing milk or meat and doing everything else the same versus entire shifting of a diet, etc., can have different impacts. So anyway, those kinds of details are there. So these are intense figures with lots of information, so I'm going to be brief as usual. So nutrient density per serving in percentages, looking at meat products, processed plants such as veggie burgers, veggie sausages, veggie bacon, tofu, etc., and plants directly as soybeans, beans, and peas, milk, and then processed plants like soy milk, oat milk, almond milk, rice milk, etc., and plants again as soybeans, oats, almonds, and rice. So they are different plants for different processed products, right? So you are looking at calories, fiber, saturated fat, iron, potassium, zinc, and riboflavin. These are nutritional information. So each one has some positive benefits on this side, or increased density per serving versus decreased density per serving. So reducing saturated fat is always good, but iron, I'm not sure whether excess iron or calories, for example, is being reduced as well. Iron is a needed micronutrient, so potassium, zinc, and riboflavin as well, sorry. And risk reduction per serving, again, same things, meat products and processed plants, milk and processed plants and plants. Again, there are impacts here in terms of fiber, cholesterol, potassium, sodium, I cannot read, HERN, and PUFA. So you'll have to go and read what they are, but you can be sure they are not good things. So the salt content like sodium and cholesterol, etc., have to be reduced, but you want more fiber. But obviously there are negative impacts of some of these things. So if fiber reduction in all of these, is that a good thing or bad thing? You have to figure that out, okay? And similarly, environmental impact per serving. So this is about risk for health, nutrient density per serving. This is environmental impact for the same products in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, land use, and water use. Obviously, you see that beef has a high impact on all. Beef burger has high, but veggie burgers and processed plants reduce all of those things. Similarly, milk has high impacts in all, but processed plants and direct plants have reduced impacts as well. If you look at cost per serving, beef is up here, but if you look at veggie burger, it's not much lower. And pork is here, so veggie sausages are much lower. So not all are uniformly reduced, some even go up. So poultry here, and veggie bacon, tofu, and tempeh. You can go and figure out what tempeh is. So plants, on the other hand, are much lower in terms of cost per serving, but for, sorry, I have a hiccup, maybe somebody is remembering me. The plants directly obviously are cheaper on everything, better for health and nutrition. Proteins you have to watch out for, but soy has proteins, risk reduction, and environmental impacts. But then if you are a meat eater, or culturally you're living in an environment where meat is part of the diet, then obviously you cannot just jump to plants. And similarly here, processed plants compared to milk can go up, but in terms of cost per serving, so that, in a rich country versus poor country, if you're trying to convince rich people that this is good for you, so it's costing more, but it's good for the environment and so on, they may buy it because saving the environment right now is a luxury that only the rich can afford. In a poor country, you cannot go and sell alternatives that are more expensive than the originals like meat and milk, right? So these are the issues one has to deal with. This is again looking at change in nutritional imbalance for meat and alternatives and milk and alternatives. I won't go into the details, but basically they're looking at let's see here, let's read. This is purchasing power parity in PPP and purchasing power as well. Okay, so I'm not going to go into details, but reduced mortality is a huge co-benefit. So you are focusing on nutrition, cost and environmental impact, let's say, and you're looking at health as well, but reduced mortality and nutritional imbalance obviously are expected if you are doing it correctly in terms of optimization, and change in environmental impacts are also all negative, but change in cost, some are positive and some are negative. So this can be an issue even for rich countries, because just because it's a rich country doesn't mean everybody is rich in that country. So the stark contrast between people who go and buy good organic food from Whole Foods in the US, which is very expensive, versus normal food or eating at McDonald's versus some other healthy salad place or so, can depend on these things, plus behavioral aspects and poverty, socioeconomics can all be kind of complicated in the way they are related to each other. Okay, so this is the multi-criteria analysis of meat and milk alternatives, looking at multi-criteria scores where higher is better for replacing meat and dairy per calorie, and here per serving in terms of replacing the same things. So here you are looking at a combination. Multi-criteria here is again nutrition, health, greenhouse gases, land use, water use and cost as a whole. So soybean comes out on top, and then you have peas, beans, tempeh, veggie burger, veggie sausages, tofu, and beef is way down here in terms of advantages or score. So in terms of milk, so this is for meat alternatives, and milk alternatives also soybean comes out on top, almonds, oats, rice, soy milk, oat milk, etc. But there are still factors that we are not considering here, in the sense, if soybean is a big cash crop and China suddenly demands millions of tons of soybeans, and if Brazil starts deforesting to grow soybeans, then you have to worry about that as well. So these are externalities. In this context of multi-criteria analysis, soybean wins for meat alternatives and milk alternatives in this multi-criteria for nutrition, health, reduced emissions, reduced land use impacts and cost. But if it is coming at a cost of huge deforestation, then you have lost the battle, right? So you have to be very careful whenever you do these things. So let's jump to the discussion. Global and regional food systems are facing multiple challenges, including how to contribute to climate change mitigation, limit the use and pollution of natural resources, contribute to adequate nutrition and good long-term health, and provide affordable food options. So food security is always critical, water security, energy security as well. Transitioning away from diets high in meat and dairy has been identified as an essential aspect in addressing the environmental and health challenges, especially in high-income countries where people are getting obese and high cholesterol, etc. But now it's the same problem in growing economies like India and China as well. Plus the total number of deaths, more than 30%, are always related to cardiovascular diseases and not climate hazards. So that's another thing to remember in terms of why emphasizing health rather than environment. They may in fact have benefits in getting people to pay attention. Our analysis considered a range of meat and milk alternatives that currently exist to facilitate this transition and contextualized them from nutritional, health, environmental, and cost perspectives. Our findings suggest that unprocessed plant-based foods such as soybeans, peas, and beans are the best suited for replacing meat and dairy in high-income countries and performed well on all dimensions that we looked at: nutrition, health, environmental impact, land use impact, emissions, whatever. Okay. So greater costs. Let's read that again. I lost my track here. I always do this. Sorry. So our findings suggest that unprocessed plant-based foods such as soybeans, peas, and beans are best suited for replacing meat and dairy in high-income countries and performed well on all dimensions. In comparison, processed plant-based foods such as veggie burgers and plant milks were associated with less climate benefits and greater costs than unprocessed foods. Just remember that. But still offered substantial environmental, health, and nutritional benefits compared to animal source foods. So some pros and cons there. Finally, our analysis considered, so I've jumped, the discussion is long, but I've jumped ahead to the end. Finally, our analysis considered product by product comparisons and replacements. They also list the caveats of their study in the discussion. Although we found that unprocessed plant-based foods performed best in the multi-criteria assessment, there could be trade-offs in specific domains. For example, while replacing meat with soybeans performed well from an overall nutrition perspective, it could increase nutritional deficiencies for specific nutrients that are at risk in more plant-based diets, such as vitamin B12, or fail to address the existing deficiencies that neither food is a good source of, such as vitamin C. At the same time, replacing all meat and dairy with only one or two alternative foods can increase pressures on natural resource use and biodiversity in regions where those foods are currently produced, because anything becomes fancy, fashionable, cash crop tends to have rapidly other unintended consequences. Adopting a whole diet perspective could address such issues of over-reliance on by diversifying replacement foods and balancing nutritional, environmental, and cost aspects at the levels of diets and meals. And of course, overall carbon footprint tracking is always going to be important, as we said, because if you are happily driving around or flying around, then all these things may be more than compensated by those activities. So you have to be careful. Okay, so just a nice note that I am covering in a very brief manner, but please go and read the paper if this is of interest to you. Okay, see you in the next topic.